My name is Hope Reagan, and I am a sixth generation hand weaver. I have a hand loom that was handcrafted by my grandfather in 1926 that I weave all these patterns on. And I have the loom that my grandmother had that was made in the 1940s at Ely's Mill in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which was a lumber mill up there, and they made looms for the local craftswomen, the mountain women up there that did hand weaving. And back in the late 20s and the early 30s, back during the Depression, there was no money, and so the ladies, the mountain women, would weave. They would spin their own cotton. They would make cloth so they could make material to make clothes for their families. And they also would do table runners, and this particular pattern right here in 1934, when the National Park was established, this was the pattern that the mountain women were weaving, and it's called a wig rose pattern. And this is a very old piece right here. This was made by my great grandmother back in 1940, and it was going to be a coverlet. She was weaving a coverlet, and but unfortunately she had a stroke and she was unable to finish it. So my mother, who was a teenager at the time, took it off the loom to save it, and so it's been handed down to me. But they dyed their own cotton, and you can see the colors are still just as vibrant as they were then. But this piece is almost 80 years old. And then this purse right here is called a drawstring bag. They wove these back in the 40s and 50s, and they primarily did it out of nylon. Some they did out of cotton, but primarily nylon. And this was wove by my mother, and this is called a honeycomb pattern. You can see the honeycomb right here. But they would sell these to the local shops in Gatlinburg, to get extra money to just to survive on. And this one right here was made back in the 1950s when I was a little girl. My mother, who always taught Sunday school, would make these for the little girls in her Sunday school class. So this was made by my mother back in the 50s. And then this piece right here is more recent. This is called, well, let me give you a little history behind this first. This pattern, I think it was in the 90s when Judy was here at the shop. She asked my mother, who was still living at the time, to design a pattern for Cam. And so my mother designed this. She designed her patterns, and so this particular pattern, she always called her Cam pattern. And so that's one that we sell there in the shop. But it's a process doing the weaving. You have to do your warps. Which takes about a half a day just to make the warp, and then it takes like another day to put the warp on, and then you have to tie all that into the pre-existing warp. And then these pieces like this right here, the wig rose, it's a very time-consuming pattern to weave. And it's a difficult pattern to weave. You really cannot let your mind wander while you're doing this pattern. And it's a beautiful pattern, and it sets a beautiful table. It's just it's an heirloom is what it is. And so when you get the warp on, then you usually put enough warp on to where you can weave several pieces, because it's just so hard to do the warps for one piece. And I'm just so happy that I'm able to carry on this tradition, because I think that my grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, and back through the generations would really be proud that this tradition is being carried on. And my daughter, who does not do much weaving right now, but she can do it. We grew up in it. She grew up in it, I grew up in it, and it was just always, we just always knew how to do it. And so I'm hoping that she will carry on the tradition, and my granddaughter will also carry on the tradition. And I thank you for letting me tell you about the weaving and about my heritage.
Hope, tell them where that pattern dates back to. How far back that pattern dates back to.
This pattern was back, I think, from the 1700s. And it's called the Whig Rose pattern, but it was named after the Whig Party. It came over from England. And it's an English pattern, but the mountain women up there were, most of the people up there were Irish and Scotch Irish, and my family comes from the Greenbrier area of the national park, and a lot of them were Irish and Scotch Irish, but this is an English pattern, and it's named for the Whig Party.
How long does it take you to do a run?
This runner right here, you can do any length you want, but this particular runner right here is a 40-inch runner, and it takes me about 3 hours to weave this. That's just the weaving time. That don't count the warping and tying it in and all that. Like I said, it's a process. It's a long process. Okay. The mountain women back in the Depression era was weaving this pattern to make a little extra money for their families, and they would make approximately $150 a year, which to them back in that time was a lot of money, and they would save a portion of it to buy a store-bought toy for their children at Christmas time.